Proverbs Chapter 5 through the Bible. Part 2. The holiness of marriage. Drink waters out of thine own cistern, and running waters out of thine own well. Let thy fountains be dispersed abroad, and rivers of waters in the streets. Let them be only thine own, and not strangers with thee. Proverbs 5 verse 15 to 17. In other words, your offspring should be from your wife, not from a stranger. Let thy fountain be blessed, and rejoice with the wife of thy youth. Let her be as the loving hind and pleasant roe. Let her breasts satisfy thee at all times, and be thou ravished always with her love. Proverbs 5 verses 18 and 19. These verses describe love and marriage, and the Word of God makes it very clear that physical love and sexual love in marriage are to be sanctified and brought to a very high level. There was a time when speaking of these things was taboo. They were not mentioned as though they were immoral or some sort of a dirty thing even among married folk. Do you notice how God describes physical love in marriage? God lifts it to the very highest plane. Remember that marriage was designed by God Himself and was given to the human family for the welfare and good of mankind. A part of the immorality of our day is the attempt to get rid of marriage. For the child of God, the Christian home is a picture of the relationship between Christ and the church. You just cannot have a relationship higher or holier than that. That is why it is alarming to see that even Christian couples in the church are breaking up. This hasn't happened in only 1 or 2 cases, but it is happening many, many times. This ought to cause the church to get down on its knees before God and find out what is wrong. It is an indication that the Word of God is not getting through to people. It is not influencing and swaying the lives of those members of the church. Marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. Hebrews 13 verse 4. God calls marriage a wonderful relationship. It is high and holy and not to be treated as something that is unclean. But notice the other side of the picture. But whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. When I was the pastor of a certain church, a man of the congregation came to me and announced he was leaving his wife and son and was going to run off with another woman. They were all church members. Whether or not they were Christians, only God knows. I was a young preacher at that time, and I really laid it on the line to him. He rose in indignation and said, "Are you trying to rob me of my salvation?" I answered, "Brother, if you have salvation, I am not trying to rob you of it. But I do want to say this to you, and I want you to remember it. If you are not God's child, you are acting according to the way the devil's children act. If you happen to be a child of God, one of these days God will take you to His woodshed, and He will whip you within an inch of your life. I am not sure, but that He may even take your life." The fellow just sneered, and he went ahead and married the other woman. The years have gone by, and those two are the loneliest, saddest, most frustrated, most unlovely people I know. I am confident they would both say, "If only I could go back and do it over." Peter admonishes husbands to dwell with their wives according to knowledge, and as being heirs together of the grace of life, that your prayers be not hindered. 1 Peter 3 verse 7. This is a real test. When a husband and wife are so living before each other that they have joy and confidence and can kneel together and pray together and love together. That home represents the relationship of Christ and the church. I want to tell you, my friend, that God can and will bless such a home. Oh, how important this is. "And why wilt thou, my son, be ravished with a strange woman, and embrace the bosom of a stranger? For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and He pondereth all His goings." Proverbs 5 verses 20 and 21. This is an interesting verse. The ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he pondereth all his goings. We need to recognize that God is seeing us all the time. God is always watching us. A man was put in a foursome for golf with 3 of us who were preachers. He was glad to get away from us when he found out who we were. He had ripped out an oath, and after he learned that we were preachers, he began to apologize. I said to him, "Brother, don't pay any attention to us. We're just 3 men like you are. But you are speaking that way before God all the time. I don't care whether you are on the golf course or in a bar or where you are. You are saying these things before God. The ways of man are before the eyes of Jehovah, and God ponders. He wonders why we act and say what we do." I think that God must get really puzzled by some of the things we do and say. His own iniquity shall take the wicked himself, and he shall be holden with the cords of his sins. He shall die without instruction, and in the greatness of his folly he shall go astray. Proverbs 5 verses 22 and 23. God says that there is a day coming, a day of accountability, a day of retribution. A payday is on the way. Man thinks he is getting by with sin. God says that no one is getting by with a thing. Man's own iniquity shall take him, and he will be held with the cords of his sins.